session. I'm very happy to be hosting this session right after the meal, whether it's lunch or dinner. So I hope you're not hungry for food anymore, but of course you're all very hungry to learn about the CRM integration. And Freddy and I will take you through a little show on that. First, I want to remind you all, if you do have questions, which we welcome very much, please send them to this alias and we will pick them up at the end of the session. And should there be any questions that we don't do in the session, they will be answered offline. Okay, so here's the 3 top-level items for the session that we'll be doing right now. We'll be looking at the integration as it comes out of the box. How do you work with that? Do some practical stuff in there, and how does the whole thing work? We'll be taking you through some of the code that's been written and some of the mappings that you create in order to give you an impression of what would you need to do if you were to take on a project of doing a CRM to NAV integration with the customer and actually enhancing the data that goes back and forth. And then finally, just a slide with some considerations that you should remember if you embark on such a project. We'll be focusing on the functionality and mostly from a developer point of view, since this is developer day. So all of the other items listed there, like pricing and markets and blah, blah, we're not going to touch in this session, just to sort of set the expectations. Okay. So here's an overview of the first part of the session. We'll start off with a demo in a second, which Freddy will take you through. Then look at how the whole thing works. And we'll have another demo, a little bit more complex, and talk about parent-child relationships. And then finally, how do you deal with the situation where something goes wrong in the synchronization between the 2 systems. So now it's demo time, and we're going to have to pass the microphone here, so please bear with us for 10 seconds. At the end it'll be only 5 seconds, but
okay. So it was because 2 mics was $20 and 1 was 10, so that's the reason we wanted to save the additional money for that. So I'm going to take you through a very simple create a customer and then contact in NAV and see that we actually replicate those over to NAV, over to CRM. So that was a connect. I wanted to get a hold of my Dynamics NAV, my favorite product, and go to the customer list here and just try to create a sample customer. And we're going to create a company here called Lars Hammer Inc. Oh, that's the number, sorry guys. So company name, and the address is, let's just take the same as Microsoft here, and postal codes, city, and Denmark. That's a good phone number, and save that one. Let's then open this guy and look at the contacts. We have the primary contact created, and I want to create a person contact here that would be connected to, let's say, where's Lars Hammer? He's down here somewhere. So this guy, and the name here is my name, Freddy Kristiansen, like that. Okay, so we're going to look at how the setup and all of these things are done later. For now, just creating those 2 entities here, and then go to my CRM product and see that if I look at my accounts, I should be able to find a company called Lars Hammer Inc. And look at contacts, should be able to find not Freddy, but Freddy. And if I double-click on Freddy here, and maybe put in a middle name, like I'm actually Freddy Kristiansen. So 2 middle names, save that guy. I should be able to now go back into my NAV and refresh this guy once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, going 5, and see that we actually get the name back into NAV again. So that was the first part of the demo, and I'm going to give the mic back to Lars.
Someone should time how fast we are in changing microphones here. Okay, so I promised to tell you how did the demo that we just saw actually work, and I'm going to look at the system as a whole, zoom in on the connector itself, what's actually happening when we transport data back and forth. It happens through running what is known as a map in CRM. And then talk a little bit about what happens inside of NAV, as we are thinking that those would be the places that you'll be working most with. So we have these 2 systems. We have CRM on your left-hand side, and we have NAV on your right-hand side. And out of the box, these both come with a web services possibility for integration. And that's exactly what this middle piece here is utilizing, the Dynamics connector, which is a generic piece of software that's developed to connect Dynamics products. And there's already a connection using this technology made from CRM to GP, and we're also working on one for AX. And today we're talking about the one for NAV. In addition to just putting the middleman in place there, one thing to know perhaps is that the connector itself also runs a SQL instance, a SQL database where it stores integration data, like when was the last time I actually ran this, and it's also storage for maps, and it's storage for logs and so on. So it's actually a full 3-tier application, if you will. And then it's centered around the maps that describe how the data maps between the 2 systems. In addition to that, there's some customizations made to the CRM product, which we try to illustrate by this guy over here. And that set of customizations, as they come out of the box, are actually part of the CRM adapter, which means that they are currently the same across all of the Dynamics ERP products. So CRM is only customized in one fashion, regardless of what ERP product that it connects to out of the box. It's very likely, if you take on a concrete project with a customer, that you will be making changes to that also. But that's how it looks out of the box. Then on the NAV side, we have added what we call integration management. It's a set of objects inside of NAV that deal with the whole integration aspect. We also have added a couple of tables, actually only 2, in the database. And the whole fashion works so that you don't have to touch the object that you actually synchronize. It all sort of takes part in this generic part of the application. A little bit of a frameworkish piece that's implemented in AL code. Okay. So that's sort of the overview of the system. Not too surprising, 2 systems and the connector in the middle. If we look at the connector itself, I already said that it actually centers on a database. It's got an integration service, which is taking care of the runtime tasks of making the systems talk to one another. That's where the adapters are hosted, and you need at least 2 adapters. In this case for CRM and for NAV. And then you've also got an integration client, which is where you go ahead and define your maps and set up your integrations between systems and so on. And we'll see, we already saw the effects of the runtime executing. We'll also see in some of the later demos some of the tools for setting up maps and so on. So that's a quick overview of the connector itself. So a key part is running a map. And a map is a definition of what data in one system goes into what data in the other system. So in this particular case, we're looking at a map that transfers data from CRM to NAV, and there will be a similar map the other way. As we saw in Freddy's demo, we were actually synchronizing back and forth, starting the data inside of NAV, syncing it to CRM, changing bits over there, and then it went back. So that process requires two maps. So that should hopefully give you a little bit of an idea of what a map is. Now, what happens when you run a map, which is what the connector does all the time, the connector runtime service. So you should imagine that time flows downwards. And the first thing that happens is that the connector will ask the source, in this case CRM, for what are the changes since the last time we ran this particular map. And CRM is going to respond with a list of changes. And then for each of the entities in that change, the connector will ask CRM to get that entity, and it will forward on that entity to NAV web services. And NAV will then consume that and actually store it in the database. Then we're going to, or the connector is going to ask the source system, has anything been deleted since the last time? Right, because they wouldn't be in the list of changed entities if they were entirely deleted. So it's the responsibility of the system to keep track of deletions also, to participate in this. Get back a deleted list, and then send deletions, deletion operations into NAV, which will then delete the entity. And then finally, we will store the last run timestamp. And the timestamp stored here is the timestamp from when we started this whole process, so that we don't miss any changes that might occur as the map runs. As you saw, it does take a while for the map to run in some cases, so things might happen to the system in between. So that's basically what it means to execute a map. And there will be a similar map in the other direction for integrating from NAV to CRM. So let's look in at some of the orange boxes that were there on the overall chart of the system. The whole thing centers on an integration ID. So each time we have a contact or a customer versus account actually shared between the two systems, what is shared is an integration ID, and it's a globally unique identifier, a GUID that you might know of this technology. You can see a few examples of them here. They're just random numbers as it would appear, but they're guaranteed to be unique. So that's the thing that ties the two together. Inside of NAV, we keep track of the link between an integration ID and an NAV record. So I don't know if how well this reads, but we've got a table with integration IDs and the actual record ID inside of NAV. So this table lists the links between the integration ID and for all of the tables that we synchronize, and then we also keep track of when this was modified. So that's the basic building block inside of NAV. It's this integration record. That table also keeps track of deletions and so forth, and a few other things, but this is the high-level picture. Then we have added to NAV a new set of database triggers. We call them in Code Unit 1. Some of you are probably familiar with the global triggers inside of Code Unit 1, where you can register for a particular table that I want to be called an insert, modify, or delete and rename. The issue with those triggers are that they only execute from the UI engine. So if you have code that changes stuff, they are not fired. This new set of database triggers are always fired, regardless of whatever way you came into NAV and changed this record. We're going to fire that trigger. And that's what allows us, in those triggers, to write code that keeps this integration record table up to date. to not pollute code unit 1 any more than we need, what code unit 1 does, it simply forwards those trigger calls to an integration management code unit number 5150, and that's actually the bulk of the NAV side of the integration. And it is in that code unit that you will go in if you want to synchronize more entities and add a few lines of code to participate in this. Then let's talk a little bit about the interface to the adapter. Remember, the connector is hosting the NAV adapter that talks via web services to NAV. And here's the list of web services that we expose out of the box to actually make this happen. And it centers on the integration service code unit, which has sort of the key operations. So there's something for asking what pages are actually part of the integration. That's what the connector needs to know, because it uses those pages to feed the entities to NAV and also to read entities from NAV. That's done through a page that exposes that data, and here's the list of pages that we expose. As I mentioned before, we need to be able to get the deleted items, and we also need to be able to get the modified integration items. And basically those two functions, they give you back lists of keys, and the adapter will then in turn, as I went through on the map there, it will in turn ask for each of those entities. Then finally there's an operation called get version. It's just to ensure that in the future the version of the connector is actually, or the adapter it would be, is actually the same as we expect inside of NAV, so that we will detect that if you have an installation with different versions. So that's sort of a quick run through of the technology in there. And here's a quick overview of what high-level entities it is that we are synchronizing. We saw the account and contact. We also have product inside of CRM that maps to either item or resource in NAV. We've got an order that maps that can be synced from a sales order in NAV. If you create an invoice inside of NAV, you can also get that invoice to CRM. Salespersons in NAV can become ERP system users in CRM. You actually, as you will notice, these last 4 entities only synchronize one way. That's part of scoping. And remember, this overall approach needs to fit not only NAV but also GP and AX out of the box. You're very likely in your own products to actually enhance some of this, I would guess. In the case of the order, you can actually create it initially inside of CRM, but once you have submitted it to NAV, it's NAV that takes control to make sure that we have consistency with our ERP data. Enough talking. Let's see some software in action, shall we?
Okay. So the next demo here is trying to create an order inside of CRM and watch it, how it goes through the lifetime, getting integrated over to NAV, released in NAV, posted, and then actually invoice, then coming back over to CRM. So I'm going to start inside of CRM and in the sales area to create an order. Loading. Okay. I got me scared there for a moment. Okay. So create a new order. I'll just call it a test order, whatever. And I'm going to pick my favorite customer, which is the Canon Group. And I'm going to ask them to actually use the pound sterling price list. Save this header so that I can type in the orders, and what we're going to do here, we're going to order some bikes. I don't know why the Canon group always need bikes, but they do, bicycles. And we need to type in the unit of measure, and let's just say we need 14 bikes. And save this guy. And then, so what Lars told about was that once we have actually submitted the order from CRM to NAV, it becomes not editable inside of CRM. So when I submit the order here, it's going to lock down and say, now this is read-only in CRM, and the order can only be modified in NAV. You can kind of imagine what would happen if it already was posted and the replication of the posted didn't come back into CRM and people start modifying it here. It would be like a mess. So let's go back into NAV and see if we can find the order over here. And I guess it's number 1007. We have 14 bikes, and everything here looks good. One thing you can see now, NAV owns the sales order, and the number is stamped to be 1007. If we go back to this guy now and close the order and actually look at the header here and refresh the order list, we can see that it now, the one that I called test a moment ago has now been renamed to 1007. So the round trip of the order going to NAV and actually the change of the number comes back into CRM, so I can get the order number there. And back inside of NAV, I'll release this one and actually do the posting. And having done that, let's see what happened to. There should now be inside of NAV a posted sales invoice that I should be able to find somewhere like down here, matching my 14 bikes. And that posted sales invoice should now also be replicated over into CRM. I'll have to look at all invoices, and let's just go to the go to the very last one in this list. I would guess it's there, or it's actually this one. Don't ask me how I know it's this one, but so we have my 14 bikes here, and at the price. So the posted sales invoice makes it over to CRM as well. So enough demo for now, and back to the PowerPoint. Let's see if I can do that without actually losing my glass.
Okay. So this time Freddy showed a little more advanced entity, namely the common header and lines pattern. So we thought we'd just briefly mention some of the things that you need to think about when you're doing that. The first thing is when you actually modify a line, you are in essence modifying the header. It's not always that the NAV logic will actually update any field on the header. But if you go look at the integration record table, the timestamp for the header needs to be updated there to reflect that the order as a whole has actually changed. So that's one thing. And that goes whether it's inserted, modified, renamed, or deleted. So that's part of what goes on down in those triggers. And also, the lines integrate as part of their parent. There's only one integration, only one page for the order. There's not specific pages for the lines and so on. That is some of the details that you have to deal with if you were to ever implement this yourself. Next demo, I believe.
So until a moment ago, until right before this session, we thought we had 2 mics, so that's the reason for we didn't want to change all the slides to put all the demos at the end. So what I'm going to demo now is what happens if something goes wrong. Let's see. If something goes wrong in the synchronization, so if I create something in NAV that for some reason cannot be integrated into CRM, and what I'm going to do in my demo data here, I have a number of currencies that are either they are from the past where a lot of these currencies still existed, and those are not inside of CRM, or they still exist but are just not created inside of CRM. I don't know. Let's go inside of NAV here and create an order, and I'm going to use a currency code that's not created inside of CRM. So whenever it tries to replicate this order over to CRM, CRM is going to deny the creation of that one and actually leave an error in the log. So Lars told about that we have this connector piece in the middle, which takes all the changes from NAV and tries to write them to CRM. What happens then if something goes wrong? There's a log also persisted in the database on the connector side, and the connector side also maintains a list of records or entities that it tried to synchronize, and there's a retry count on those, so it's going to retry that entity a number of times before giving up. And then you can see in the log how these things are. That log, by the way, is also, you can set that up to send emails whenever something pops up in the log. And these emails are, one set of emails can be sent to users when it's a business validation rule that actually denies the entity. And if it's a system error, like if it's a crash on the CRM or on the NAV side, it's sent to a different list of users. So that's actually pretty good. Let's just create an order here for the Canon group again. I've sold a lot to those guys. And more bikes. Just a single one this time. Actually, that's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to delete this line first. What I wanted to do is to set a foreign trade currency code to SIT. And I don't know what currency that is. And apparently CRM doesn't either, as you'll see in a moment. So I'll try to save this one. And let's see, where did it go? It's probably at the end, right? So here we are, number 1008. Go over into CRM and see what happened over here. Look at orders. There might be a order in here that has a balance of 0, because I don't know why it's so slow here, but so there's actually an order here, but there are no lines on it, because the lines are the ones that carries the currency. And now in the connector piece here, I can go to the NAV sales order map to order. So NAV sales order to order is the one that goes from NAV over to CRM. And I can view the log for this one. Refresh the list here. And I should have a warning on the top here where it says that an error has occurred while processing the key and then some GUID. And of course you know this GUID, so you'll immediately say that, oh, that's my 1007. But you'll actually get the pretty good message here that the price list with the Dynamics integration key SIT is not available. So in order to figure out what order is this, so right now I kind of just created it, so I of course know what it is. But I can take this GUID and copy that, and then inside of NAV, I'll just open the classic client where I can run the integration record table that Lars told you about a moment ago, where we have the integration ID mapping to the record ID. And I can put a filter in on exactly this GUID here. And it's going to tell me that that belongs to the sales header, order number 1008. I remembered wrongly, I thought it was 107. So I can now go into NAV on my order, 1008. And of course then change the currency to something else. Euros is probably more worth than the SIT anyway, so it's better. Say OK to this one, and a little later, and let's see how much later, actually already now, I'll see that this one now also have the lines here for the bicycle to a price of 5,800 euros. That's a cheap bike. So it kind of shows how to troubleshoot when something goes wrong in the integration. So yeah, through the integration record table. I think we go back to the presentation.
Okay. So that brings us back to the next part of this session, which is about enhancing the CRM integration. Maybe one of the things that you might want to enhance with is a little UI on top of mapping the grid to the actual record inside of NAV. We're actually going to collapse those two demos up there to one. So I'll talk a little bit about mapping entities again, and also talk a little bit more in detail about the integration management inside of NAV, and then Freddy is going to show you the mapping tool and also show you the actual code that you would need to go and modify if you wanted to enhance this. And then after the demo we can talk about some more special cases to think about when integrating entities. Okay. So there are basically two things that you might want to do, and one is adding fields to entities that are already mapped and already synchronized across the two systems, and you have to then make sure that these fields are exposed on a web service that basically goes in both ends, both NAV and CRM. We're focusing on NAV here, but they have to be accessible to for the connector to map. And then you need to open the mapping tool and add the maps for the new fields. And you can do stuff like the target field value is equal to a field value on the source. That's kind of the simplest map. You can also set constants. You can do expressions, and you can even call functions. And there's actually a set of functions as part of the NAV integration for dealing with currencies and so forth. So there's a library of functions there that you can use. The other thing that you might want to do is to add a new type of entity, such as quotes, for instance. Both NAV and CRM have the concept of a quote, and you might want to also integrate that across the systems. Then, of course, what you need to do is you need to choose what page you want to expose inside of NAV for the quote. And in general, there shouldn't be anything for you to actually change on that page, but again, you have to make sure that the fields you're interested in are actually on the page. They don't, that's a little tip here, they don't necessarily have to be visible on the page. So you can stick stuff on the page that you're using only for the integration purposes, but that does not show up to the end user if that's what you want. And then, of course, since this is a new entity you want to go over, you have to go and create a new map so that it can be executed. And if you want both ways, you have to create two new maps. So that's about the mapping task. Inside of NAV, there's a couple of things that you have to go and do in that code unit for integration management if you are adding new entities. If you're just adding fields to existing entities, you don't need to change this. But if you are adding new entities, you have to enlist as an integration record or potentially as an integration child. We talked about the difference before. You have to also specify which page it is that is used for this table. That happens in here. And sometimes there is some code that you need to add. There are a list of special cases that we can come back to later, and Fred is going to show a little bit of that in his demo. The great point is that for the actual entities that you're synchronizing, you don't have to do any changes at all. It's all managed in this integration record table, so you're not going to have to change the quote or anything, or the page for the quote. And then you have to also consider what are the changes to your CRM entities, because the entity model in CRM and NAV are obviously different. So in some cases, you actually need to have some more data added to the CRM model in there, such as the integration key that keeps the name of the NAV record. So that's what you have to go through in the abstract, and let's see a demo.
So I promise you this is the last time I'll get the headset. I'm going to give it to him one more time and then we're going to be out of here. Or, oops, not that one. So I'm going to show you the mapping tool inside of the connector, and I'm going to go through the changes that's done inside of NAV. Let's just find the connector here for once. So we saw it a moment ago where we looked at the error code. But what's more interesting to look at the map. Let's just look at the map from the CRM order to the NAV sales order. And what we have over here on the right-hand side are all the fields on the destination record and what are they mapped to on the source record. So in NAV sales order, there's a number of fields on that page, and it's only a limited amount of those that actually are mapped. The integration ID is mapped to the sales order key ID on the CRM side. And the only other thing that's mapped is the customer number, and then a number of fields on the lines. The reason for this is that NAV is kind of the owner of the sales order. So you just get over what is the customer and what are the lines, and then everything is calculated inside of NAV, and as you saw, the number actually came back into CRM. So CRM now will contain the result of the order after replicating. This is how we did the default installation. Of course, this is this can be modified in any installation to match whatever rules you have in various companies. But this is just the default. On the lines, you'll have a entity called lines, and then for the single line, you would have the number of the product. So here's how you actually step down and find the Dynamics integration key on a specific product. And then you of course have the quantity here. You have a requested delivery date. And the last thing, actually, all of these things are mapping fields to fields. But the last one down here is actually mapping using a function like if equal and a lot of things here. What we do is, you don't have the concept in CRM of resources or items, but we have that in NAV, and we need to figure out the thing that you put on the order inside of CRM. Is that a resource or an item? And the way we do that in the default map is just to create an if statement to check if there's hours in that one, it's resources. If not, it's items. Of course, again, this one can be modified to fit whatever matches the actual implementation. The other way, when we map sales orders back into CRM orders, we have more fields that we actually move over. The fields in bold here are the mandatory fields inside of CRM, and you have to set those. So the Dynamics integration key is the order number, and that's what you saw. Actually, the name is also mapped to the number. So that was to show the order name came back into order number came back into CRM as the name. And then we map like the bill to address and the sell to address, and of course all the things with the relationship to the customer and the lines and stuff like that. Let's see. Price list. I think we have lines at the very end. No, we don't. Okay. Well, the customer here we have. Let's just go down to that one. Oops. This mouse is. And the Dynamics integration key on the customer is set to the bill to customer number. So Dynamics integration key is not a field that normally exists inside of CRM. And if we go to CRM, as Lars showed you, there's actually modifications done to CRM in order to make this work. So I'll customize entities here in CRM. And let's just have a look at the order entity, since we've been looking at that a number of times, and see what attributes on this entity are custom. And you can see here that the connector, the adapter, actually added 2 fields or 2 attributes to this entity, which is the Dynamics integration key and a field called is ready for integration. And actually, if we then take a look at the form here, we'll also be able to look at the code on some of the events. No, not. Let's see. It was actually not in there. Oh, there's some code somewhere. I can't remember where it is. That actually disables the form whenever the integration already has happened. So let's then look at what happened inside of NAV and what modifications have been done there. Let's go to the classic client here. And we've already seen the integration record table, but the code units that this is all about is the integration service. That's the service that's called from the connector or the adapter, and then the integration management. If we look at the integration management code unit here, the very first thing that happens is that whenever you want the integration to start working, you need to go into NAV and enable the connector. Where you do that is actually in a function called marketing setup, and there's a small field called enable connector here. Whenever you set that check mark, it's just gonna call a function inside of this code unit called enable connector. The enable connector is going to run through a number of functions here that's going to expose a number of pages as web services, and then it's going to expose the integration service down here as a web service as well. So this is about exposing the pages, exposing the integration service. This one loops in and see if before you actually enable the connector, you might have had the connector enabled already and then disable the connector. And if you did some deletions or whatever of records in the meantime, we have to kind of make sure that all of these things are then replicated to CRM, and that's what happens in the mark delete integration records. The very last thing it does is set up integration tables. That one will actually run through and create integration records for all of the records that you integrate. So it's kind of filling up the integration record table. And whenever you're done enabling the connector, you will have the integration record table initialized, and you can start the integration of everything. So let's go back to this one and run that one. As you can see here, the integration ID will be created for everything. The record ID matches the record inside of NAV. The modified on, let's just make this a little smaller so you can see it, is the timestamp of when this record was last modified inside of NAV, and the deleted on is set if you have deleted this record. If the record is deleted, we'll clear the link back to NAV, because there's no reason in having a link back to NAV that points to nothing or points to something that's no longer there. The worst case is actually you could create the same entity once more and get into a huge problem in that one. The integration record table also contains a stamp of what table this came from and what page this came from, or what page you would need in order to read this again. And of course, in some cases, tables are the same for like invoices and orders and quotes, but the page ID would be different there, and we would actually honor the logic on the page so that you cannot get to invoices through the order page. But let's see at look back to the code unit here. So the places where you need to do customizations in order to add things to this one would be a function called is integration record or is integration record child. These functions are at the very end of this one, and actually this is just stating whether this one is used for integration or whether this one is used for integration as a child. What happens is that in the beginning of this code unit, it actually enables these on database triggers for all the databases that are either one or the other here. And the other place you would have to modify is in the function called update parent integration record. So if you have a header line pattern, you need to update the timestamp for the header whenever something changes to the line, and that's done in the update parent integration record, and that one actually hard codes the various lines you have here. And the way we do it is just to check if it's a sales line, find the integration record for the header, and modify the timestamp of this one, and do the same for invoice line and ship to addresses. I know that ship to addresses and customer are not a header line relationship, but that's how CRM sees it. So we need to modify the timestamp on the customer whenever a ship to address actually changes inside of NAV, so that CRM can go and query for modified customers since last time. We don't have a map for ship to addresses. And the last one down here, function where you might add some code, is get page ID. Typically, it would be a one-to-one relationship in the get integration pages, where you would have this table is this page, but in some cases you have two pages, as I said before. Orders, quotes, and invoices all have the sales header table. So for those, you'd actually need to return what is the page used for this type of entity. As Lars talked about, we had a couple of special cases then, and let's just touch upon the two special cases we have in this code. One of them is here, and that's actually inside of the on-database delete trigger, and it's these lines. What happens here is that whenever we have a sales order inside of NAV and we post that, what happens, as you guys all know, is that the sales header is actually being deleted and an invoice is created. The deletion of this sales header, if we just mark that as deleted in our integration record table, the sales order inside of CRM will now be marked as cancelled. And I can kind of imagine that any salesperson that would sit in CRM and live in CRM, and he would create a sales order and send that over to NAV, and suddenly he sees that his sales order is cancelled. He'd like, what happened there? Where really cancelled means posted. So we ignore that, and it's going to stay as submitted inside of CRM instead of getting cancelled. We have no way of actually replicating an information back in the standard CRM that this is now posted. That's not built into the standard map here. The other special case is down in this function, and that is we only want to replicate contacts which are of type person. And we do that by checking here that if something was let's see what happens here. If something was a person and it's now a company, then we actually say that we delete it over in CRM, and that's the second special case here. So enough for demos. I'll give the word back to Lars and wrap up.
Okay, so back to the last few slides here. We went through some of these special cases, and I think I can run through them briefly again. So, child updates the parent timestamp we've touched upon a number of times. Freddy just mentioned that sometimes you only want to integrate some of the records in your table, like you don't synchronize contacts unless they are of type person. And the reason for that is that that's how CRM works. We also have in NAV some typed tables, as we call it here. So it's one table, but depending on a type field, it actually contains different data, like invoice, orders and shipments and so on. That means that depending on that type field, you have to use a different page. There's different logic associated with the different types of business documents. So you have to take care of that as well inside of your integration management. And we saw the special case where we actually keep the entry in the integration record table when an order, a sales header is deleted, in order to keep integrity in the CRM system. Then in addition to the entities that we've actually talked about, there's a bunch of supporting entities that need to also be mapped and synchronized for the whole thing to function, currency codes and payment terms, shipment methods, and so on. And we listed those that are part of the out-of-the-box solution here. Then we're actually into the final part of this session, which is about implementation considerations. So as I go through this, it's a very good time to think about questions and send them to that email alias if you haven't already done so. It would be nice to have a few Q&As at the end here. Don't worry, Freddy says he's got a whole list. Okay, that's good. So as you might sort of have perceived from this run-through, what we ship out of the box is not ready to be installed with the customer. It actually needs a development project to understand the scenarios that really make sense to this particular customer to sort of finalize the end-to-end solution. And you should of course be aware of that. You can't just take this out of the box solution and expect it to just run with the customer. There's a project associated with that. And what we've tried to do is highlight some of the things that you have to think about and some of the code you have to go and write in order to make that a success. You need to remember that just installing the connector actually customizes CRM. So if that particular CRM installation is already customized, which is very likely to be the case, you need to merge the customizations. And there are ways to do it. It's just something to sort of be alert of. And the final point there says, you know, now you have not two, interestingly enough, as I've pointed out, the integration component, the connector itself, also has a database. So you don't have two databases, you have three databases that you have to make sure that you maintain in sync. It's no good to just take a backup of one of these guys and then think that you can restore that independently of the two others. So that's something that you have to also think carefully about, not only in your development project, but also as you actually run this system on the customer side. This is something that just comes with the territory when you're entering integrations. Integrations are simply a challenge. But we believe that we've laid a foundation here, and we are reusing components that has been used for other synchronizations between CRM and ERP systems. So go for it. Let's have the last slide up. Okay. Yep. Questions? Does the connector work with Dynamics NAV 2009 and 2009 SP1? And the answer is no, and you cannot make it work. In addition to the application code that we've shown here, you need the new framework level triggers for insert, modify, delete, and rename inside of Code Unit 1. And they will not be part of NAV until 2009 R2. So you need that. That was the first question. So the question is, what version of Dynamics CRM do we support? And the answer is we support 4.0 as we release, and once CRM 2011 releases, which is the next version of CRM, we will also have an updated adapter released for NAV, potentially hotfixes to NAV if that's needed. Oh, Freddy is correcting me here. The adapter released should work with 2011. The guarantee is that we will test it works with 2011. So there's a question about rename. So the CRM connector looks great, but how will it handle renumbering of, say, a customer number inside of NAV. And the good news is that it will actually handle that. It's exactly because of the integration ID, which is the thing that ties together NAV and CRM. So if you go and rename a customer, that should actually be renamed inside of CRM as well. We saw a little bit of it actually happening when Freddy was creating an order. He called it test, and then he went and actually got that order inside of NAV, and then it gets assigned a number. And that number, the NAV number, was mapped back to the name. And we saw the order was actually now, was it 1008? Yeah, so that's kind of a similar situation. Yeah, I don't know. I think we stick to the protocol as we stick to these questions. Which one did you choose?
I choose the easy ones.
Yeah, I've been able to answer them all, haven't I? So far. Just about. Is the CRM integration company specific, or can I just integrate one instance of NAV with one instance of CRM? And it is company specific. We maintain this table on a per company basis, but I'm just thinking, so yeah, okay, it is. As you know. Okay, there's a question on mapping. How is incompatible field type properties handled? Say if I send a decimal to an integer or a text of length 50 sent to a text 30. So there's a set of functions built into the connector that allow you to actually do this mapping, but it is something that you have to do explicitly. I think you'd get an error if you try to map a faulty type. Okay, so the decimals to integers actually auto-convert, but you need to clip the string yourself if it's too long. If you have 50 characters to 30 characters, for instance. Does the CRM connector require RTC because of the use of page objects? Yes, exactly, and because of the use of web services. That's something that runs on the server. It does not run on the classic stack. Does your application have to run RTC? Well, it always should. There's no technical reason why you couldn't actually run the entire application UI through forms in R2, but that's going to be the last release you can do that. Any more goodies? Okay, so why did we see an error as we were trying to synchronize the SIT currency? And the reason was simply that was not listed as one of the supported currencies inside of the CRM system. And the point of that demo is to show you how should you deal with the fact that an integration might fail. As the map runs and we get to the point where we insert the entity into the target system, that operation might actually fail for whatever reason. And we chose a simple one, which is just a currency not supported in CRM, to be able to show you actually have to map the grid inside of the error message to the grid inside of the integration record table. I believe I also commented that you might want to add a UI for that.
Let's comment to that one. The issue is that we don't just map the string SIT, we actually map a reference to a currency inside of CRM, and that reference is dead on the CRM side, and that's the reason for the failure. But I think our time is up now, and I think we need to say thanks for this and get Yuri up here.